Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. I have never obstructed justice.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never.
The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder.
See, there's the fake news back there. Look. Fake news.
Disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage.
Go ahead. No, not you. Not you. Your organization's terrible. You are fake news.
When the president says fake news, he's talking about news that doesn't make him look good. I'm not sure that regulation would have any impact on the behavior of the White House because they haven't shown any particular interest in obeying the laws, and Congress hasn't showed any particular, or the Senate hasn't showed any particular interest in making them obey the laws. So we're kind of in a difficult situation. I mean, I think part of the problem is that the term fake news is used in multiple ways. And when journalists are talking about fake news, or people that are worried about Russian or Chinese interference into our election, they're talking about news that is made up in order to propagate, undermine an election, fuel racism or xenophobia, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think that you want to regulate the latter, certainly, especially on social media, where most of it occurs.
Extensive literature has been released since the 2016 presidential elections regarding fake news, but very little, if any, of the discussion is centered around or even inclusive of the members of the United States government. The U.S. government has a rich history of releasing false information to the public. Today, it is no secret that we are constantly being lied to by public officials and government representatives. Though outraged at first, American citizens have come to understand that news coming from the government is not necessarily verified information. In the United States, currently, there has been no law passed regulating or banning the spread of misinformation by government officials. U.S. Code 1038 outlines certain regulations that individuals must adhere to when it comes to the dissemination of accurate information. If an individual fails to comply, sanctions, as outlined in U.S. Code 1038, will be imposed on that individual. It is important to note, however, that the code states this section does not prohibit any lawfully authorized investigative, protective, or intelligence activity of a law enforcement agency of the United States, a state, or a political subdivision of a state, or of an intelligence agency of the United States. While regulations have been put in place to mitigate the spread of inaccurate information, the United States government and government subdivisions are not obligated to follow this code.
I would say about half of the foreign wars that we have fought have been based on government lies. So the Mexican War, for example, the Spanish-American War, for example, clearly the Vietnam War, for example, clearly the Iraq War, at least the 2003 version of that. Those are huge, huge government lies. There are lots of others. Watergate, notoriously, the President Nixon was lying like crazy about all kinds of things. And many other, I'm sure there are many other episodes that sort of don't come to mind, but it's, I guess I would say, unfortunately not uncommon, and particularly I think maybe you see it in the foreign policy domain, but also in domestic policy as well. You know, the government kept saying all through Vietnam, we're winning, there's light at the end of the tunnel, the boys will be home by Christmas. These were famous lines that, you know, policymakers were using, the Secretary of Defense or the President or somebody would say. And then, you know, outrageous things would happen. We would lose a battle really badly, or the Pentagon Papers would come out and reveal all these lies, or famous case of lying, President Nixon was bombing Laos and Cambodia, which were neighboring countries to Vietnam, and The Vietnamese knew it, right? Everybody on the ground knew it, sort of the world knew it, but American citizens didn't know it. I'm unaware of any statute or constitutional provision that prevents policymakers from lying. And of course, in the Trump administration, they do it as a regular practice as far as I can see. And I don't say that because I disagree with their politics. You know, I think there are a lot of conservatives who would say these guys just, and gals, they just lie as a regular matter. You know, it's not the exception anymore, it's the rule. But there really are no consequences. There aren't any sort of legal incentives that I'm aware of that prevent public policymakers from lying. If you lie to Congress, or if you lie under oath, let's say in a deposition, that is against the law, and you might be prosecuted, or you might very well not be. But for presidents and policymakers, let's say to go out and on the White House lawn tell some whopping big lie, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, when they don't, therefore we're going to war. There are no real consequences to speak of. And that case actually I think is really, really troubling. I mean, I'm absolutely, completely convinced, both by the character of the people involved, but also by the facts of the case, that the Bush administration, second Bush, George W. Bush, absolutely lied their fannies off in order to get into a war of choice that they wanted to get into. And depending on how you count, nobody really knows, but maybe as many as 1 million people are dead now. Okay, certainly 100,000. What are the consequences for that?
Any like a representative that lies to its people, lies to their people that they represent, should immediately be out of office. I mean, I don't think that you deserve to have that position if you can't truthfully execute it and be truthful to the American people.